Hi, this is Vivian and Belle, and we are partners on our final project where we are connecting our research from elephants in our gel electrophoresis lab back to the 8 units of biology. We hope you enjoy.
In the lab, we were analyzing the different DNA bands of the elephant populations to figure out the major hotspots where elephants were poached in the savannah. We figured this out through gel electrophoresis, and then in the end, helped us ultimately get to the bottom of where the elephants were getting poached. So for Unit 1, Chemistry of Life, there are 3 things that kind of make up this unit, which number 1 being class of macromolecules, as shown in the picture, being carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Number 2 being the building blocks of chemicals and living things, which are carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. And then third is water, which enables reactions to occur within the human body. So to connect this to elephants, DNA, which elephants have, is a nucleic acid, and it's prominent during the lab. So in the lab, we compared the elephant's DNA to other populations' DNA, which helped us identify the major hotspots in specific areas poaching occurred. And then lastly, the elephant's tusks, which is what we also looked at in the lab, are made of a protein, a macromolecule, that's called collagen. And this shows how organisms produce and utilize chemical substances because they have them on their bodies and then they also utilize them in their ecosystems.
In Unit 2, we are talking about the cell structure and function. The cell structure consists of many different organelles, but the main ones are the nucleus, which stores the DNA, and the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell and provides energy for all living things. There are 2 main classifications of cells, which are prokaryotic versus eukaryotic. The prokaryotic cells are usually simpler and less complicated, whereas the eukaryotic cells are more complex and larger. Prokaryotic cells consist of bacteria, whereas eukaryotic cells are usually consisting of animals. Furthermore, the passing of molecules happens through the semi-permeable membrane, which determines what can enter and what can leave the cell. So basically decides what's good and bad for your body so that nothing harmful is going in. To connect this back to the elephants, we talked about the formation of the elephant tusks, which are made of proteins, which is a macromolecule. First, the ribosomes make the proteins, then the endoplasmic reticulum helps move the proteins, and then the Golgi apparatus packages and sends proteins to the cell. In the picture, it shows the structure of the cell, and it shows the Golgi apparatus, the ER, and the ribosomes that all help our cell function and each have a different job. Lastly, we analyze the DNA of the tusks, which is located in the nucleus.
So for Unit 3, which is cellular energetics, photosynthesis, and cellular respiration. Cellular respiration makes adenosine triphosphate, ATP, by releasing energy, and that energy is stored in glucose. And animals withdraw energy from the food molecules. And then photosynthesis powers life on Earth through the sun. So the sun is kind of shown at the top of the model, the highest force of power. So cellular respiration and photosynthesis both kind of have different energy resources, like animals and plants, mitochondria, cellular respiration in animals, chloroplasts, photosynthesis in plants. And then to connect it to elephants, just like us, they exhale CO2, which is shown in the model as the animals release CO2 in water, and then it goes back to the plants and contributes to the whole cycle of photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Then lastly, elephants, just like us humans, exhale CO2. As shown in the graph, the animals are releasing water and carbon dioxide, and then it goes back to the plants and contribute to the whole cycle of cellular respiration and photosynthesis. And then lastly, elephants consume large amounts of food daily, which is needed to fuel their bodies, and then also gives them energy.
Next in Unit 4 talks about the cell cycle and the differences between mitosis and meiosis. To begin, mitosis is a process that helps organisms grow and consists of 6 main stages that is shown in the photo, which is interphase, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and cytokinesis. Those stages are all crucial for the organisms to grow. Next, meiosis is crucial for sexual reproduction and produces gametes, which can also be known as the sperm and egg cells. So, after mitosis, there is 4 daughter cells, each consisting of the same set of DNA. And after mitosis, there's 2 daughter cells, which consist of 2 sets of DNA as well. The cell cycle is crucial because it replicates and divides cells through the processes of mitosis and meiosis. Meiosis uses the process of crossing over, whereas mitosis uses each phase. To connect this back to elephants, we figured out that elephants' DNA was produced through meiosis, specifically known as the S phase, which is where DNA is replicated. This helps show the origin of the elephant's tusks and how they came to be. Furthermore, the male and female elephants, the sperm and egg, have reproduced, which shows the process of meiosis and genetic diversity, in which each elephant gets different genes and traits from the mom and dad, which help make them who they are.
So for Unit 5, which is heredity and genetics, one main scientist we studied was Gregor Mendel, who discovered that some traits mask others, also known as dominant traits mask recessive traits. These traits are controlled by multiple genes and alleles. And then heredity shows relatedness within a family, showing evolution, so kind of connecting it to the picture and from the parents to the offspring and so forth. Traits get inherited, traits get passed on. So the passing of tusklessness has trade-offs between male and female elephants. Females without tusks would be protected from poachers, showing them to be unaffected, which in the picture, unaffected daughter, unaffected female. And the males, though, rely on their tusks for survival and breeding, which means that without their tusks, they are affected son in the picture. Then lastly, through the gel electrophoresis, we analyzed the elephant's traits, which showed that where they were most commonly poached, and then ultimately helped us find a solution to the poaching.
In Unit 6, it talks about DNA structure and replication, as well as protein synthesis. To begin, replication is a semi-conservative process where DNA replication produces two new DNA molecules, each containing one original strand and one newly synthesized strand. As shown in the picture, each DNA strand coils together at the end to create one new DNA molecule. To add on, protein synthesis occurs in cells to make proteins, which can also be known as transcription and translation. Different proteins are made from the instruction of genes, which can also be known as the central dogma, which is almost like an equation for the different traits, which begins with DNA, then goes to RNA, then protein, then makes the trait. Rosalind Franklin, a scientist, figured out that DNA was a double helix with a sugar phosphate backbone. And to connect this back to elephants, we figured out that each population has a unique DNA sequence containing adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine, just in different patterns. And it shows that DNA is within every cell, just translated differently through every animal and person. Lastly, we figured out that the growth and production of ivory starts from DNA. Investigating the elephant's DNA fragments led us to discover that the heavily poached areas and the origin of the tusks, so that we can figure out the hot spotted areas where the poachers were going, so that we can put an end to poaching.
So for Unit 7, which is natural selection, also including evolution, we learned that genetic change in populations is passed on from generations to generations, from parents to offspring, and so forth. Organisms with favorable traits survive and reproduce, meaning that organisms with these specific traits can survive in the environment, and then they reproduce and create more offspring with these traits that succeed as well. And then this natural selection is a process by which organisms become better adapted. So kind of going back, they have these traits, they adapt to the environment, and then they reproduce. To connect it to elephants, they evolved from an animal named Dicynodonts, which had similar teeth. It was a common ancestor, and their teeth changed from short bone to long tusks, examples of homologous structures because they have different looks, but they have the same function. And lastly, female elephants were tuskless, which made them more, quote, fit to the environment and made them less vulnerable to poaching. To connect this to the picture, there's a really tall giraffe, there's a medium giraffe, and there's a short giraffe. The tallest one is the more, quote, fit to the environment because it's able to eat its own food.
Next is Unit 8, which is ecology. Ecology can be shown through a food web, which shows the food chains within an ecosystem. As shown on the picture, it shows the different types of animals and how they relate to each other and help each other grow and produce in the environment. Furthermore, there are different ecosystem cycles, such as the carbon cycle, the water cycle, the nitrogen cycle, and the phosphorus cycle, which each help the ecosystem in different ways. To add on, there are community interactions, also known as symbiosis, competition, and predation. Within symbiosis, there is parasitism, commensalism, and mutualism, which are all different categories talking about how the animals interact with each other and where one benefits and one doesn't, and talking about how they interact. To connect this back to elephants, we figured out that the elephants impact the ecosystem because they are keystone species, which means that they play a large role in a population and maintain the structure and diversity of the ecosystem. And so a lot of the different animals rely on them to survive. Lastly, the poaching in the savanna is an example of parasitism because the elephants are harmed by being poached, which is showing that they are not getting benefited, whereas the humans are benefiting from the ivory tusks by gaining money and different resources from it, whereas the elephants are just getting harmed and used for it.
So for our first slide, the quote is, "Each year sees the disappearance of thousands of plant and animal species, the great majority become extinct for reasons related to human activity." To connect this to elephant ecology, due to the poaching in Mozambique, which is what we learned throughout the whole unit and then also throughout the labs, elephant populations drastically declined, and they strongly impact their ecosystem. So without them, other animals suffer. Solutions we came up with was to enhance protection in different national parks in areas elephants are in, and then also inflict penalties in poached areas, specifically to those who are poaching against the laws. And then to connect this to the pictures, there's an elephant without their tusks, which kind of just relates back to the point where elephants get poached, then they adapt to the environment, and they reproduce and create more elephants without tusks. And then the second picture shows tusks that are marked up, which kind of is what the poachers do. They hunt the elephants, get their tusks, mark them, and then sell them.
Another way to relate elephants back to Laudato Si is through the quote, "It is not enough, however, to think of different species merely as potential resources to be exploited, while overlooking the fact that they have value in themselves." Connecting this to Laudato Si, we figured out that the poachers hunt elephants for the resource of ivory and don't really care about the fact that the elephants are unique because of their ivory tusks. And this causes adaptation to occur and takes away from the elephant's needs in the wild because the males use their tusks to breed. And if they don't have it, they have to adapt and change their way of breeding. A solution that we figured out to end poaching is to use DNA tracking like gel electrophoresis to track down the origin of ivory and to educate others on the elephant's ivory and showing what they're doing when they're buying the ivory and what it's causing, that it's causing harm to the elephants. In the first picture, we show an elephant with their tusks that show how they were born and how they survive, whereas in the second picture, we show an elephant with their calf, which shows their bond and value with each other. And so, in the eyes of God, He wants humans to love and care for animals instead of hunting them, which just shows that we need to have care and love for each animal and not try to fix them or break them down just because we want to gain something out of them.